Tony D and little Joan is asleep on the couch, and this is a screenwriter's take on All Quiet on the Western Front. I finally watched it on Netflix. It's a really good movie, but it is not a happy movie. So, as always, I'm going to give you my non spoiler review and then the spoiler review, and we'll break it down for screenplay's sake. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books, links in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey, it's the Pineys. Books that'll make you laugh, unlike this movie. Okay, so now this is based on a classic book. The movie's been made before, and this is the latest incarnation. It's really good. It's really well made. It's excruciating. It's an excruciating movie to watch. It's a little slow, I'll say, in parts, but ultimately it's about how senseless and stupid war is. And really, they should show this terribly depressing movie to high schoolers so they know, hey, don't start wars. So basically, it starts. Well, I don't want to get into that part yet. So you know, it follows the arc of people think war is going to be this adventurous thing, but really it's just grueling, chaotic, and stupid, with no rhyme or reason for people being killed. It's and it really captures that. There's no over melodramatic moments here where it's like, oh, they only did that because they knew each other, kind of thing, which is often a problem in dramatic screenplays and in war movies. So this feels very chaotic and crazy and pointless, and that's exactly how war movies should feel, I think, for the most part, depending on the kind of war movie it is. Probably the slowest parts are the negotiations for the armistice, which, it's historically accurate, so I'm not giving anything away here. And, it's not totally a character-driven thing. It's really about bigger events and bigger statements about war and life and humanity and things like that. So the character arc of Paul, excuse me, the main character is, one of starting like naive about it and then becoming the grizzled veteran that he eventually becomes. Beyond that, I can't really say much without giving it away. If you haven't seen it and you can tolerate an incredibly sad movie, go to Netflix. It's on there now. They made it, and it's very high quality. The effects are amazing. It's again, it's not over dramatized. So when things happen, they're horrifying, but it's not like, they overplay their hand. So in some respects, it's better delivered that way, I think. It is kind of long. It's 2.5 hours long. Could it have been shorter? You probably could have trimmed 10-15 minutes off of it. And that's really about it. There's a lot of blood. If you're afraid of blood, do not watch this movie. This has more blood than a horror movie. And, some of the things that happen, you're not quite sure what happened. But here's the armistice. You got to figure out, some of the historical stuff you sort of got to put together. I knew just enough to get through it. This is towards the end of the movie. This is Paul. You can see by the expression on his face how utterly sick of this as he is. And this is his sergeant and various other people. This is a fun scene. There are a couple of light moments, but not many. More of the armistice that's earlier in the movie. So would I recommend it? Sure. If you like this, this is the true face of World War I. It's just absolutely grueling. Absolutely grueling And yeah, that's about all I can say about it without getting into the actual events. Now, if you haven't seen it, go watch it on Netflix if you can tolerate this kind of movie. If you're a screenwriter and you're looking to write a war movie, I think this really captures war in a great way. Um, it's almost clinical in its presentation in some parts of actual war, and then the other scenes are very human. You know, it's about guys just trying to live their life, and they just want to live their lives. So, okay. Now let's get into the spoilers because I feel like I'm going to give away anything by talking about this. All right, so that concludes the non-spoiler review. All right, spoilers. First act, Paul and his buddies think they're going to go to war. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Everybody tells them how awesome it's going to be, so naturally they sign up. And Paul has to lie to get in. I guess he's too young, or his parents need to sign off. I guess they're in high school. And of course they go, and almost immediately, it's awful. It's horrifying. Like, right out the gate, it's horrifying. And I guess the first act is them just realizing how horrible it is. And then there's the bunker scene, which is a pretty intense scene. And then you're into act two the moment his friend dies. Because now you go, oh my God. They've been to war for like less than a day. One of his friends is already dead. And this is just the worst thing ever. So act two is following Paul throughout the war for a good portion of it. And, so for a good portion of it, they're in it for 18 months because there's a cut scene where it just jumps 18 months. And, they're on their way to like armistice. But of course, nobody on the German side really wants the armistice other than the government because they're effed. This is late in the war, and they are absolutely effed. There's no way they can continue to fight in the war. There's no way they're keeping anything. And so they have to completely surrender. And that's, this all sets up the stuff for World War II, but it doesn't get into that. And then, of course, the third act is even more horrifying as one of the German generals knows he has one last day to do one last charge. And he does one last charge 15 minutes before it's 11 o'clock when it's supposed to all stop. And they go, and it's terribly murderous. And then it ends about, how it's supposed to end, which is just everybody's dying. So, it's... I knew of the story. I didn't see the original or the previous incarnation they did back in the 70s. I knew of the book, and I knew generally what the story was, but I didn't know the ending. So the ending was like, oh, man. But in some respects, you could see it coming. You could definitely see, right, Cat, his friend, who dies right before him, when they rob the farmer a second time. At first I thought, oh, he's going to get killed. And then Paul goes in to steal the goose, or he ends up stealing eggs. And then I'm like, oh, they got away. Oh, okay, so maybe it's not about that. And then, of course, Cat goes to take a pee, and then the farmer's kid shoots him, and then, he just slowly dies. Everything in this movie is so agonizing, right? The tank crushing that dude is messed up. Everything's messed up. Paul is just insanely lucky up until the end, right? And then, literally minutes before it's supposed to end, he gets stabbed, and that's it. That's it for him. He slowly dies, just like everybody else in this film. I guess except maybe his friend who got torched. Oh, my God. Never surrender if you're in World War I, apparently. So, the one thing that I'll say kind of takes me out of it is they always hire English actors to play Europeans. And I get why, but... the English were on the other side of this war, so they're supposed to be playing Germans. I think they needed to have German accents. I appreciate that it was all in English, but if they all spoke in German accents, I think it would have helped me feel like it was more German. And instead, they're talking in English accents, which was kind of annoying. Kind of annoying. Um, I fully expected this to be subtitled, quite frankly, and be in German. But, you know, it wasn't. Then he had some bits at the end, some titles at the end that were in German, and I thought, well, that's weird. Did they dub this movie? I don't think they did. I mean, I got the subtitles on, but you know, it was weird. But you know, it shows the. I don't know why I watched this on Thanksgiving. I just wanted to see a classic, I guess. What other classic moments? Well, you know, it's a whole story arc of Paul going from wide-eyed, totally naive to, oh my God, what have I done? And then you finally get that third act where the general's like, he's shooting his own men just to get him to go over the wall one more time. I thought the general was going to shoot himself at the end, but he doesn't. You know, so what can you learn from this in terms of doing your own movie? Well, it surprised me a little bit when Paul died, right? So that's a good way to end it, though. I mean, he died. You know, he goes through all this horrible things and then he dies anyway. I mean, that's a statement of war right there. You know, his friend Franz, you don't even see him die. You don't even know what happens to him. He just gets caught up in the crowd at one moment and goes the wrong way, and you just never see him again. And then later they find him dead. The really, I think the most intense scene is the guy who kills himself. Right? He's crippled. He knows they're not going to save his leg. He doesn't want to live his life as a cripple. He's dying anyway, and he just takes himself out. That's a brutal scene, an absolutely brutal scene. And also the scene where they, you know, go to the farmer for a second time, which is, when you think about it, it's just so dumb, right? It's like, it's the end of the war, dude. You're going home. You're going to rob the farmer one more time and take a risk of being shot? That kind of frustrated me, admittedly. But, you know, it is what it is. It's war. It's totally pointless and senseless. The drama, the humanity of the various characters, that they're trying to help each other, they're trying to be nice to each other, I mean, within their own ranks. But ultimately, you know, they're just in this meat grinder, and they really captured that. They, you know, especially the opening scene, which I feel was like the best scene in the movie, right? So you see the war, they take off all the uniforms and boots, and they're recycling them. And they're cleaning them up, and they're sewing up the bullet holes, and they give it to the next round of guys, including Paul. And that's a great opening, and that's why it's such a great ending, right? Because the opening of the movie, Paul gets a uniform from a dead guy who you see die. And then he sees the guy's name tag in it, and he's like, oh, I think I got somebody's uniform by mistake. He goes, no, this just didn't fit him. And they rip that out, you drop it on the floor, and you see a whole pile of them, right? And then at the end, they have to collect his name tag just like they have to collect for all the other bodies. And like, you followed this guy the whole movie, and he's just become yet another dog tag in the pile of dog tags that they're eventually going to write on a list. So that's a perfect sort of bookend for the movie. It's a meat grinder. War is a meat grinder, and here's the meat grinder, and here's a guy who went through it, and he almost got out, but in the end, he doesn't. And that's how you address like the bigger arc of war. You know, there are little arcs in there. You know, Paul and his buddy Cat, who he becomes friends with, but the war's going to end, and Cat is a shoemaker who can't even read, and Paul's educated, and Cat's like, yeah, we're really probably not going to be doing stuff together at the war because you're educated and you got to go back to university and do something real with your life, and I'm just going to go back to making shoes. And you really get a sense too from Cat that like he doesn't even know what he's going to do if he goes home, right? There's that great scene where Paul is reading him his wife's letter, and he's just imagining like, how can I even go back to my normal life? And he's imagining like, maybe I'll just stay here with you guys. And that's kind of like foreshadowing his death, right? Like, there's no way he's going back to normal life. And you could see why people get so messed up after being in a war like this, right? How can you ever go back to normal life? You'll never be the same. You'll never be the same. You'll be, you know, I never really understood PTSD. You know, I'm old enough that I ran into a few Vietnam vets over the years. one in particular who was a bus driver at my college, and he had some real issues. He had some real issues, and you could tell it was just simmering under the surface for him. But he was a nice guy. You could tell he had been through some stuff. He'd seen some stuff, man. So that's about it. It's just the incidents themselves are almost superfluous. They just keep piling up. They're in the trench, they're shooting. This guy dies, that guy dies. Guys are dying everywhere. The scene where they go into the trench and kill the French, and then end up in the room with all their food, and they start eating the food, and then the tanks come. That was a great scene. Like, for a moment they're like winning, and then the French. I didn't realize the French had flamethrowers in World War II. That was pretty nasty scene, really nasty scene. And they didn't take no prisoners late in the war. See, that's the problem with like War II. Like, that's why I guess did they have the Geneva Conventions then? I guess they didn't. So, yeah, good luck to you if you try to surrender. Yeah, I don't think they had POW camps in World War One. If you were a valuable prisoner, I guess they might have kept you alive, but not some grunt. And even in World War II, when they had the Geneva Conventions by then, I've heard stories about that where they didn't want to take the prisoner. We can't take these guys prisoner, kill them all. So it's just a brutal movie. It's just a brutally bloody gore fest in a lot of ways. I always say when I'm reviewing horror movies, I don't like gore fest, but man, this is about as close as I get to a gore fest, because at least it's, they're at least all these. Here's the general. God, you're just so mad at him. I always say I don't want to see gore fest, but I watch this because there are these great scenes of humanity in here. The guys having the goose in the first scene is a great scene, and it's just very simple. It's World War I, so you don't have all the distractions of games, music, and all this stuff. It's just you got to come up with things, regarding food and survival and things like that. So another reason to watch a film like this, assuming you can handle it, is you really need to tune yourself into just doing non-modern things, I'll say. Everybody needs food. Everybody needs to survive. But, like, you forget that, I think, as screenwriters. You don't get down to the basics. So this is a real movie that it's forced to go into the basics. If you're writing a movie about World War One, you need to know the level of technology, number one. But you also need to wind back the clock. And I'm old enough to kind of remember a time like that. It wasn't. There were distractions, TV, phones, but not like phones today. Today it's 10 times worse. 10 times worse. Back then, I don't know, books maybe. They didn't have TV, maybe radio. I guess they would have had radio. Radio was newish. But in the trenches, these guys were just farmers with guns, basically. And they were just set into this meat grinder. And, I love the cinematography. That's great. The acting's good. Everything's good about the movie. It's just, it's grueling to watch. Part of me didn't want to watch the end. I just wanted to, I can't watch much more of this. Now that I'm done this review, I'm going to go watch something happy. I think I'm going to watch an episode of South Park or something so I can laugh. So, it's not a movie you want to watch to feel good. But it is. I do feel like it's an important movie because it is a classic book. And it's a good adaptation of that. I'm sure there's more to the book. But I think it definitely captures the spirit of it and the spirit of war. I think probably the 70s one was a little more dramatic. It probably would have been. Definitely wouldn't have shown some of the scenes here. I could definitely recommend this movie. But I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who was like, if you're bummed out, it's not a, you don't want to see this movie unless that makes you happy. For some people, that makes them happy. Um, you know, and after you see this, see something light. All right. That's it for me, Tony D. Did I do the 3-act breakdown? Yeah, I did. So nothing really much to say about it because it's just all these little vignettes. I mean, really, it's first act. Really, the first act is, oh, we're going to war. It's going to be great. And then the first act really ends with them realizing, oh, this is not going to be great. And then it's not great for the entire second act, which is most of the movie. And then the final charge is like the third act, really. It's like Cat dying really begins the third act. It's like, oh, you're not done suffering yet. And then boom, everybody's dead. So, kind of like a zombie movie, which I do like. This combined with a zombie movie, that would be really interesting. But that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Thanks for tuning in. What's going on? I'll do videos tomorrow. Don't forget Saturday, I'm at River City Comics. And then Montclair. Check out the link below for my book tour. See ya in the next one.